Today we would like to discuss the topic of Choose to Challenge, which is the International Women's Day campaign theme. The campaign states, a challenged world is an alert world. Individually, we're all responsible for our own thoughts and actions all day, every day. We can choose to challenge and call out gender bias and inequality. We can choose to seek out and celebrate women's achievements. Collectively, we can all create an inclusive world. This said, we're going to view Choose to Challenge from the perspective of women in technology. We have 5 amazing women on our panel who have chosen to challenge throughout their lives and careers, and we'll be exploring their experiences and asking for guidance and their perspectives on the future of women in tech. For our audience, we hope you take away insights from our panel's broad range of capabilities and then applying your own career development journey. So without further ado, let's get to know our panel. To kick us off, Dianne, can you tell us a bit about yourself, your career history, and one memorable challenge you have faced either as a woman in technology or from working in male-dominated environments?
Thank you so much, Lauren. A pleasure to be participating in this panel with so many amazing women, and I'm really keen to hear their stories and journeys too. I'm very happy to start off with mine. So I'm Dianne Hewitt-Mills, and almost 3 years ago to the day, I set up my own global consultancy firm. So Hewitt-Mills acts as a data protection officer and advises as such as well. And so we advise many organizations on complex data protection, privacy, cybersecurity issues. I have the privilege of having to create a diverse team from scratch, and I have the intention to do so. So we are diverse by design and are able to influence boardrooms in that capacity also. In terms of a challenge that's unique to me, I guess I was very surprised by the lack of diversity when it came to women-owned technology companies, and it's great to have Julie on here as sort of as an example, a shining example of how it is possible to be done. And so it was that sort of lack of representation I was really very surprised by. And obviously being a Black female also, again, just didn't seem to be others in that same position. And, you know, I really questioned that and why that would be. And actually what dawned on me also was just the lack of funding, really, for women-owned businesses. And, you know, you have the double whammy if you happen to be Black also. And so I think, you know, there's definitely more focus on that. I'd noticed there's a sort of following the Black Lives Matter movement, definitely been sort of questions around diversity, funding of women-owned businesses, Black-owned businesses too. And so I'm hoping to see more progress in that regard, and many more like myself in the field.
That's really exciting, Dianne, and hopefully we can explore that a little bit further with some of the questions that we have lined up. Julie, would you like to go next and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Julie Simpson. I'm the founder and CEO of Resource IT Consulting. We are a technology channel agency, so we have delivered about 4,000 projects to technology companies all over the world. That includes Microsoft, AWS, and many other or big technology vendors. I guess in terms of challenge I faced, it's an interesting question, and I know what Dianne is saying. We know there's a challenge in our industry, and that's why we all attend and give time to events like this. One of my biggest challenges was being, in my early career, being the only female in a very male-dominated sales environment. And there's 2 ways you can deal with that as a woman. You either become one of the guys and kind of join in with the culture, or you actually try and stay who you are and true to yourself and be a part of that. And I've always been very proud of the fact that I'm a woman. I've always been very happy to have a door held open for me and to be female and be proud of being a female. And that doesn't mean that I couldn't succeed. And I earned the right for the respect within the team because of my capability and what I could achieve. So it was all about my capability and not whether I was a boy or a girl. You know, I had to come to terms with that quite early on. So I think the opportunity's out there for all of us. It's about how we go and get it, and what we can do to make things better for the next generation. So really excited to be here, really looking forward to the conversation and hearing from everybody and talking to everybody on this fantastic International Women's Day. What a pleasure it is to be here.
Thanks, Julie. That's really, really great. Thank you very much. Kim, are you able to introduce yourself as well?
Sure, thank you. So my name's Kim Bozella. I'm a managing director here at Protiviti. I lead our technology consulting practice for financial services, as well as our technology strategy and operations practice. Part of joining Protiviti, I spent 15 years at a global bank in a number of CIO positions. And prior to that, I was a partner at another management consulting firm. So a lot of years. I'm an engineer by school. I'm a wife. I'm a mother of 3. I've always been very active in diversity and inclusion efforts throughout my career, either in executive sponsorship roles or formal and informal mentoring. So like others, I'm super excited to be here, particularly on this special day. I'd say I don't really have like one specific challenge to share. I would say it's the continued experience of often being the only woman in a room in certain conversations and therefore feeling the need to bring that diverse perspective or having that diverse perspective, which is often a challenging and counter views to many of the other perspectives in the room. So I don't think that's going to change in the near term, though we keep pushing. And I think it's really important that we do. And so I'm excited to be here and share some of those thoughts throughout the day. Thanks.
Thanks, Kim. I think we've probably all had times where we've all felt like we are the only woman in that room. So I'm sure that's something that pretty much everyone here can relate to. Liz, would you be able to introduce yourself?
I will. Thanks, Lauren. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. Liz Murray, currently working in cybersecurity at HSBC, leading the education awareness team, delivering cybersecurity education and awareness globally to all of our colleagues. Prior to that, I had a 20-year military career where I was very often the lone female, amongst a considerable number of men, and quite far away from any form of civilization as well. Looking at a challenge, I distinctly remember turning up as I was the first female to undertake a particularly, how do you say, nutty role. It was a lot of fun. It was the best job I've ever had and very practical and hands-on. First female to do it. I was RAF, and I turned up in an army environment approximately 200 miles north of Nairobi, to be seen to be the only female there and to hear a very, very loud member of the organisation that was hosting us say, but it's expletive deleted female. Well, there were some great things about that, actually, because they were so blunt about it. It allowed me to be quite blunt back. I had the capability. I was there because I could do the job. So I was very confident in my own ability. And we just had a particular interest to drive up. So I was kind of a bit wired for that anyway. And I was able to be not rude, but blunt back. Say, well, yes, but I'm here. I'm all you've got. Deal with it. And let's see what we can achieve. And actually being able to be that confident and to push that forward worked really well, because the problem was solved in 15 minutes, moved in and actually was seen as someone who was capable, because I reacted. I didn't react in the same way he'd reacted, but I very much dealt with it as a capable female. And I think that's a really key thing to do. You learn through your career, though. We all make mistakes. And I think we'll get through some of that today. And I'm really looking forward to that discussion. It's something you learn and you grow. And we can also, we did things wrong when we were younger, didn't deal with it the best way, but actually it's going to be great to be sharing those experiences through this afternoon's event. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. I really love that as well. And I think about, when you think about the military, that's one area that I automatically just think male dominated career move right there. So wow, I'm sure we'll have a lot to discuss there a bit later. And last but not least, Emma, are you able to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Lauren. Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today, and it's an absolute privilege to be on this panel. And so amazing women, which is great. So my name is Emma Leith, and I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Santander in the UK. So I report to the global CISO and help influence the cybersecurity strategy across the bank. I've worked in cybersecurity, or information security it was back then, for the last 15 years, and before that I worked in IT, and I've got a maths degree. I've worked for various sectors and different types of jobs throughout my career, from a Ministry of Defence to oil and gas, to telecoms, to banking and investment banking. So really throughout all of that, worked in male-dominated environments. And I think if I think about the major challenge, again, like others, it was very much early on in my career, where through school and university, I was just myself. I never really thought about being female and being different to my peers. And it was then getting into the workplace where I'd come across situations where I'd be asked to take the minutes, or a more junior colleague of mine who was male would be the one that would be sort of asked the questions within a meeting, and you start to sort of feel a bit out of place. And for me, I've always had that inner self-confidence, and you're right, you do learn along the way, but I think it's just really important that you just keep, act with integrity, be yourself, and not let these sort of bumps along the road get you down. If anything, they make you stronger, and they make you more proud of what you can achieve. So really excited to be on this panel today. Looking forward to it.
That's perfect. Thanks, Emma. And actually, that's a really nice introduction, for a lovely first question even for you, if we take that forward. So I guess as a woman who has worked in a male-dominated field your entire career, what are some of the tools and skills that you have learned along the way to get to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to what I said about acting with integrity, but bring yourself to work, be yourself. I've found myself in situations and organizations where I've not felt comfortable and perhaps not known why. And I think it's really important that we all go through sort of self-learning and self-development. And the tools for me is to adapt your style depending on the situation. But if you're in an environment where you don't feel comfortable, don't automatically think that it's you. It may be the other person that perhaps has got insecurities, or it just might not be the right fit for you. So I think just be true to yourself and ensure that you're in an environment where you can be successful. And perhaps if it's an environment where it needs a lot of change, it needs lots of transformation, as long as you've got a really good sponsor and mentors, and you know that the organization wants to change, it wants more diversity, then that's a good place to be. But if you look upwards and you don't see any signs of anybody wanting to change that and perhaps just tick the box, then I think you've just got to find your home, find your right place, and be yourself.
Thank you. That's really good. I think finding yourself and being yourself in this environment, in a male-dominated environment, is really, really important. Liz, I guess if you can continue on with that question, you've obviously worked in very male-dominated fields your entire career. Are there any additional tools or skills or lessons learned that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing, and Emma says there about being yourself. I didn't ever feel that I wasn't equal. I've never felt that I'm not equal. And that really helps to underpin. I think if you go into a situation with a feeling of I'm the only female, they're all going to be, then actually you start to do yourself a disservice. You have to have confidence that you are good at what you do and that you have the knowledge. Now that confidence isn't there all of the time, because feeling that you're equal and feeling that you can do it are mutually exclusive. They're not linked at all, but we sometimes link them by mistake as a way of explaining why we feel nervous. Actually having to develop the confidence to deliver effectively and succinctly in a business environment takes practice. It takes practice to do a presentation. we don't all start off being amazing at delivering an hour's presentation. We have to get to learn to know our environment and what's expected of ourselves. And I think sometimes we actually see ourselves off by making this assumption it's because we're female. Well, actually, it's just because we're a little bit nervous. And we need to just use that confidence, know that we're the subject matter expert in what we're saying, and have practiced it, have it back in the head, back of your head about what it is that you're going to deliver and how. And I think it's just really important to know that confidence takes time to get, it takes time to achieve. And sometimes midway through a meeting, when you get another ping in the back of your head and you think, oh crikey, that's it, I'm not sure, I'm about to make myself look really daft. Actually, that's when the doubts start to creep in, and you have to just kind of overlay them and just get used to it, and just to take the calming breath, be the confident person, and deliver as the confident person in the workplace rather than the female in the male-dominated environment. And I think that's really, really key. And actually, do you know what? Under pressure, when everybody's relying on you, it doesn't matter whether you're male or female, you're delivering the information that they need at the time.
How do you get some of that confidence, though?
To start off with, it's learned probably. I think I was very lucky when I went through, as I say, I never felt that I wasn't confident. I come from a family that's male dominated. There's my mum, who's very, very direct. She's actually pretty brilliant. And I have two brothers, and then there's my dad, and my dad was a policeman. We came from quite a service background when it came to it. And when I went through training, I went through in a combined flight, male and female. What's great about that, I'm not the best runner in the world. I'm tall, I'm relatively thin now. I wasn't as thin at the time, but I'm not a great runner. And I know that that's one of my issues, actually, but I have a brain and I can solve problems. So it didn't matter. There were guys that could run off, and you do these exercises because they test your ability to think under pressure. Well, if you're really bright, the only way you can start affecting people, and everybody's at the same level, is to take away their sleep and make them knackered. Because under pressure, you then have to make the right decisions. So they make you tired. Wasn't the best runner in the world. Guys in my flight were amazing. One of the guys was about a 2:28 marathon runner, something like that. So he was amazing at going and getting all the bits and pieces we needed to while we were out in the exercise area. Couldn't make the links when he got back to make the decisions. So what happens is people start to realize that everybody has a role to play, regardless of their gender, regardless of their background. If they've got information or skills, then they have something to add. And once you start to learn that you have the skill, and actually that person that you thought was really amazing and shiny has flaws, then you start to develop that confidence, because you start to realize that everyone has flaws to an extent. Everybody is just making it up on the fly and trying to get away with it. That happens. We know our subject, but actually when asked the question, like, right, I've got to answer that right now. What am I going to say? And is it the right information? If you know you're doing your best, you know that everybody's got flaws, then you start to develop that confidence and that competence. It takes time, though. You don't expect to have it at 22, 23. Also, if you have got it, then don't expect to not get it knocked. That's life. You start to learn through it. You have these peaks and troughs.
If I could just add, I think that's completely right, Liz. And I think the repetition, just do it again. Go try it again. If you weren't brilliant the first time, have another go. And if you have to prep extra hard early on, it will make it that much easier the next time. But just keep doing it.
Yeah, correct. And that it's that preparation, practice, and failing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Failing is the biggest, fastest way to learn, because you never do it like that again when you failed once.
Yeah.
Definitely. The lessons from failure. I mean, there are podcasts and everything on that topic that we could probably cover as well as part of that. But that's really great. Thank you. So, Dianne, I guess from a different perspective, you've set up a business from scratch in the male-dominated area of cyber risk. Can you tell us what has been the most noticeable challenge that you've faced in building your business that you don't think men would have had to deal with?
So, yeah, this is an interesting question, because I think I've always had to do it to prove it in many ways throughout my career. And you just get used to just doing that. You get used to having to be excellent to be noticed. You get used to quietening that sort of critical voice in your head. You get used to persevering, much as has been said before. and would, men have to go through the same challenges? I just don't know. I mentioned before the sort of lack of funding for female-owned businesses, Black-owned businesses. Will men have to go through the same challenges? I don't know. I just know my own experience, and my own experience was, yes, it was tough, but actually that sort of toughness is what has built my resilience throughout my whole career. And so in many ways, the experience wasn't new. But I got a lot of comfort from being successful at it and proving that you can create a diverse team in a professional services environment and be successful at it. And you can lead as a woman and build diversity by design into your business and be successful at it. And so, supported by the team that I have, and in fact, they've all bought into this sort of bigger purpose beyond profit that we want to serve. And in many ways, I've kind of done it my way and the only way that I know how. And I hope that through that, I can also serve as an example to others, because I want to encourage many more women, many more individuals from ethnic backgrounds and minorities to do the same thing. And there's a lot of reward that you get from being brave and, taking a chance and doing the hard graft and getting there.
Perhaps in that case, Dianne, if I flip that around, so rather than it be about a challenge that you don't think men would have had to deal with, do you think there's been any advantage to being a Black woman setting up your business?
So, I mean, the honest answer to that is certainly there aren't any privileges that you are able to rely on. You don't have that sort of background of sort of having a leg up, or perhaps the networks that others would have. But definitely, I think, having got to the kind of position of setting up the business and being successful at it, I think the advantage is that you do stand out. And certainly, for the clients that we have, they recognize that there is a benefit to having a diverse voice in the room. And they've all bought into that. And so, yes, I would say perhaps that is the advantage, that you can be influential in ways that, others might not be, and in a really positive way also.
That's brilliant, because actually I think, if we look at, well, if I flip this over maybe to Julie, and you can help with me with this question here, is, we know that having women in the technology sector, and women in any area of the business, there is an advantage to having that diverse perspective. But can you tell us maybe a bit more about some of those commercial benefits for an organization attracting women into technology and hiring and promoting women into leadership roles?
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. I mean, Dianne, what a wonderful job you've done, and you are an incredible role model. And I hope there are lots of young women like you who are there listening to you and seeing this, and that you're giving the empowerment and that feeling of potential growth for all of the people that are listening. So, amazing. And Liz, I mean, I've overcome some situations, but the way you describe the experiences in the forces, I'm not worthy. And I come from a tough background. I've got 5 brothers, and I'm the youngest of 9 children. And so, I was the little squirt that was always pushed around and picked on, and was at the back of the queue. But I don't think anybody that knows me would say that I lack confidence as a result of that. It makes you fight harder, for sure. So coming to your question, I think it's quite simple. By having an increase in diversity in your business, in your team, in your company, in your organization, you are increasing the size and scope of the business that you can bid for and win. Because if we're all the same, then we all have one set of opinions, and this has been proven. And I've said this before. The Range Rover, when they decided to put women on the design team for the Evoque, and it became the biggest selling car that Range Rover had ever had, because it appealed to a diverse group of people, and it wasn't just about the kind of car that would appeal to men. Women loved it too. So, and there are many examples of women on boards, meaning that businesses are more profitable. So it's about talent. It's about diversity. It's about having people with different views, different experiences, different opinions. And in technology businesses, we all know that the buyer has actually changed in many situations, and we're not all selling to men. You know, women are in positions of making decisions. The HR directors, the sales directors, the marketing directors, the managing directors in businesses across the globe are not all men. They're also women. And women do think differently to men in certain situations. And by increasing your diversity in your business, you're increasing your opportunity. And as far as I'm concerned, that will create commercial advantage for sure.
Thank you. I like that piece that you were talking about. You know, basically ask women. You know, we should be asking women and involving women in our organizational decisions. Emma, are you able to comment a bit more on some of those commercial benefits for an organization of attracting women?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right that we need to appeal to our audiences, and with you know, there is as many women as there are men. So why would we want to cut out you know, almost half of our audience, of our customers? So there's clear commercial benefits there. I also think that, and this is probably natural in my sector, my role, but if I think about resilience and the viability of an organization in the aftermath of the banking crash in 2008, when people thought that big banks were too big to fail, a lot of the research was saying that actually, if there was diversity in risk decisions and at the board level, then perhaps they would have seen the risks earlier and changed their direction and their path. So I think having different voices in the rooms, having a mix and that sort of gender balance, but diversity of thought, I think that's really important for all organizations and their viability. It's only, I think it's just getting harder and harder to survive for all organizations. So why would you want to limit your possibilities?
Definitely. And being able to increase that balance, you know, with women in senior leadership roles, so we have a more balanced forum of members. Which probably leads nicely into diversity quotas. And Kim, are you able to maybe answer a question for us on, you know, do you feel that there is a place in our organizations for diversity quotas for senior leadership roles or bodies?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? Many see quotas as it's like a short-term fix. The quotas where they put, so recently in the US, we've just passed in California a bill that all boards, corporate boards, include a minimum number of underrepresented people on their boards. And that'll be the first state. Obviously, Europe is much more progressive on the topic. I think people recognize the quotas themselves are one step that has to happen. It's an important step, but it's just one of the steps that we need to do. I think the downside of diversity quotas is the potential tokenization of candidates, you know, and the perception that that individual otherwise would not have been qualified for the seat, which is the complete opposite of where we want to be. I think the intention behind them is right? It's ensuring inclusion, you know, that it's not about lowering the bar or changing standards. It's about enforcing and broadening, and opening up the search to find those qualified candidates to ensure the boards, leadership positions, and organizations more broadly are representative of their communities or countries where we operate and live in. So I do think I think it's important that we do it. I mean, while I believe a broader approach is needed that can look at, and a more comprehensive approach for companies, so that they're looking at diversity from those senior most level positions all the way through to like your entry grad programs, and all the steps in between in career development for individuals, women, and underrepresented folks, from career development and payment milestones. Like, the approach needs to be comprehensive. That said, what better way to start by ensuring that the leadership of firms that can influence these practices has the representation of thought and inclusive at that level. So I think there is a role, I think there is a place for it, but in and of itself, it's not enough.
So it's not the only way. And that tokenization that you were talking about, you know, we want to have women as part of those, in those roles, but we also need to be listened to.
Absolutely.
Dianne, are you able to expand a little bit on diversity quotas as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important that you have that infrastructure around you, critical to your success. I think it's asking a lot to place somebody in a position without offering the support and the mentoring and the sponsorship, quite frankly. And I know certainly I have benefited from having allies and people championing and supporting me in roles, and that has allowed me the platform to be where I am today. So providing quotas without infrastructure and support, you would just have a revolving door. You'll have very talented, diverse individuals coming in and out of your organization. So you lose all the benefit that you're intending with a quota. So I would say really, really important that you have that infrastructure. So individuals looking up can see actually there is, you know, an opportunity, and actually can relate to those at the top. And without that, as I say, it will just be tokenism, and there will be no substance, and you won't have that sustainability.
Yeah, and I think it's the infrastructure to support it. I agree, Dianne. And I also think our firm, we all just have to work harder, right? It might not be as easy to find that incredible woman for that role, but then just look more, look harder, look different places, reach out. All of us have an obligation to find other women that we know that are incredible and to bring them along. So I do think in some cases it might not be as easy, particularly in technical fields, but when you look at the schools, a lot of the girls in STEM, representation in STEM has far more women now than it used to. So they are there. We just have to find them and make our firms work harder to bring them in.
I also feel about quotas that isn't a quota an intentional decision by the organisation to drive change?
Yes.
You know, it's not a case of, oh, okay, the girl's going to get the job because she's a girl. It's a case of the organisation making a decision that they want to be more diverse and inclusive, and that they are actively going to attract more women into the positions to create balance in their leadership. And, you know, that's really the reason. And anybody that perceives that someone else got the job because of their sex is often, most times, in my experience, so far off the mark. You know, she got the job because she's bloody good and she's the right person and she's got the experience. And we have made a strategic decision to create diversity in our teams. And that's why we've got a quota. And, you know, that has to be defended to the point of allyship that Dianne mentioned. If you are in an organisation where that is being said, and I've talked to some people in very senior roles where they've actually said they've had guys saying, well, there's no point in me going for that role because they want a woman in it, because I know that they're trying to create more balance in leadership. I mean, that's just defeatist. You know, if you're the right person for the job, you'll get the job, and maybe the next role will be a female. You know, it's about intentional decisions that are made at a strategic level to create balance in their leadership teams. And I think it's you've got to start somewhere, recognise you're behind, decide you're going to do something about it, and then set some goals that the senior team can strive to achieve. And that absolutely needs to happen.
So maybe if we talk a little bit more about the allies and the male allies, I know that's something that Dianne and Kim, you also touched on. Maybe Dianne, you can talk a little bit about male allies and how they've supported you.
Absolutely, and I think it's right to absolutely champion the male allies because they make such a difference, really. I think, you know, with all diversity, having an ally championing you is so much more powerful than you trying to do it on your own. And often it's said, you know, what can we do to help? And I think that's a really good practical step that, you know, men within organizations can involve themselves in. And it's great to see so many male champions and allies on the call today actually proactively supporting diversity within their organizations. And as I said, I would not be where I am today without the support of some incredible men, you know, too many to actually thank, alongside, you know, very supportive women also. And, you know, this is not, it's not a mutually exclusive thing. You know, you can be a man and champion women. You can be, you know, straight and champion the, you know, gay causes. You can be able-bodied and champion disability. So, you know, allyship in all diversity, I think, makes a huge difference. And I want to just take a moment to say thank you, really, to all the men championing this, because we really do need your support.
Dianne, I completely agree. Without it, we become an echo chamber, to use those phrases. We sit in a nice little room telling one another how amazing we are and why doesn't anybody else notice? Well, no one can notice if you're only ever looking inwards. You've got to look outwards, and you have to have people who recognise that there are people who are talented, regardless of what they identify as, what they are as a gender, where they come from, what their social background is. Those assumptions get smashed out of the water when you have someone who knows you for your capabilities. And so having male allies is absolutely essential. They've got to be authentic, though. Is that I have sat in it was a Women's Day event a couple of years ago where, introduced by a man, he was amazing. He was absolutely amazing right to the end when he said, my wife was the primary breadwinner. She wants to go back to work and I'm not going to let her. And we all sat there going, excuse me, what now? Which is a real drama because he'd been amazing. And then you go, but if you're not living it authentically, because what is that then telling your children? You would tell your daughter that she could do anything, but you're not demonstrating that at home. So it has to be that authenticity. But male allies, absolutely, we've got to have that. Without that, it's pointless. We can all sit here and say how amazing we are, but nobody's going to break through any ceilings anywhere if you don't have people who recognise your capability.
And just to echo about male allies, sorry, Kim, did you want to?
You go first. Yeah.
I can think of 3 men who have been so influential in my career, and what they've actually done is they've challenged me. So if I was in a role where perhaps I could do more and I wasn't challenging myself, I've had an individual, my manager, who sort of questioned, saying, Emma, you can do more. What do you really want to do? I've had someone who's been saying, why aren't you applying for this role? And I was like, well, so I think it's just really important to have, it just helps with your confidence, but you're right, Liz, you know, we shouldn't be in this echo chamber. It's about all of society embracing everybody, regardless of who they are. So I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I think, you know, it's those men that advocate for women when the women aren't in the room, right? It's those that are being proactively advocating and engaging in sometimes difficult discussions when we're not there. Like, I think that's the real ally. On the point on a mom, so I'm a mother of my daughter's recently graduated from college, an engineer, working in an engineering firm, and then I have 2 sons. And I think being a strong working mom is almost more important for my boys to see than my daughter to see. Like, I tell my daughter all the time how amazing she is. She can be whatever she wants. She can do whatever she wants. And she honestly believes that and has gone out into the workforce believing it. I think it's important for boys to see their moms doing it, to kind of continue their allies without even knowing it. And they something will happen in the middle of the day, or when they were younger at school, and they say, well, we're going to have your parents come in, your moms can come in at lunch. He's like, well, my mom works. she can't come in. Can we do it later? Like, what a great thing to see in your children. So I think that's the other piece that we have to do, is have that influence over our sons and the younger men, so that they grow up not even thinking twice about it.
Kim, that's really interesting, as I'm a new mother of a son, and that's definitely given me something to think about, actually, in terms of how I engage with him and what he sees over the years as well. So Kim, maybe just to continue with you, how should we engage men to promote gender equality?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? I mean, I think in many of the firm, I'll say many, most, men still hold many of the senior roles and senior positions. So it would be silly for us to think that we can't engage and involve them in all the change that needs to happen. So I think there's the proactive allies, and then sometimes you have to take those that aren't being proactive allies and make them allies and make them part of it and bring them in and enforce it and really push to make change. You know, and I saw some questions in the chats around unconscious bias. Yeah, you have to call it out, right? When you see it, you have to call it out, because often it's unconscious and often it's unintentional, right? And so I think you just have to keep doing it. But as long as, you know, the positions are not even, right? And we have to kind of get to where we're in 50-50 positions around in different roles. We just have to keep working together as a group, and it should continue to be that way going forward.
Definitely. Thank you. So actually, maybe if we touch on that unconscious bias piece, I know, Liz, something that, you know, one-on-one we'd had a discussion a bit about situations where you do feel like there is a bias, but it's very easy to get hung up on the wrong problem. When there is that unconscious bias there. How do you identify the right problem, and what is the best way to appropriately address it?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Sometimes you can be sitting in a meeting and people will be using very male-dominated terms. I actually don't have an issue with that. I never have. It's just the way you use language, isn't it? I've never massively managed to get myself particularly hung up because you have a chairman. However, I know there are lots and lots and lots of females out there who do, and they want to change the terminology, and I get it, I understand it, and I understand why it's important, because actually it's about perception of females being equal and us all being able to do it. I do get that. Getting hung up on it and addressing that in a meeting very directly, or if you're in a presentation and someone's been using that terminology all the way through, that's the wrong thing to get hung up on. What do you need to be doing? Showing how great you are as a female at asking the killer question, getting to the real point of the matter and making them think. Now, within that question, you can absolutely frame it, you know, to talk about the people, the women, the person, take the terminology, switch it around and use the terminology you want to hear reflected back at you, because you will. Once you've made that comment, if you've asked the question, you're saying, you know, you said that the chairman, you know, you said that the chairperson needed to be, when that person has categorically used the word chairman all the way through, and then asking a really smashing question afterwards, one that makes everybody go, wow, amazing. The person will reflect back at you. They'll use the right terminology, the terminology you want to hear. And what you'll see is a change. And it's gradual and it's progressive. But getting really hung up on the language and calling somebody out for it will just make everybody sit there, roll their eyes and go, oh, here we go again. And that's what we want. We want people to see us as capable and amazing. We don't want them to see us as people who are sitting there ticking off the bandwagon list. We don't want that. We want to be amazing, right? So getting sorted and hung up on the right thing to do, which is to make yourself look capable, but do it in a way that doesn't belittle the other person. And that's really key. And I've seen it done both ways. And what happens when someone does that belittling thing is that the entire room takes a collective inhale. There's the uncomfortable shuffling of papers, and everybody just feels a little bit nasty about it. So it's about looking and doing it the right way from my perspective, and going for the right problem rather than the wrong one. Some people are unreformable. They are. If you spent 80 years, and this happened to me, I had a guy who asked me whose wife I was, because we were accepting an award for the organisation I was working in. I was the only female military member of staff there. We were mixed civilian and sorry to go back to the military side, but it was a really great example. This guy, I got quite bristly about it to start with, and then I remembered He was in his 80s. Yes, okay, maybe he should have been looking to be a bit more diverse, but he asked me who my husband was. So, dear, who's your husband? Well, I'm here, I'm a major with that. And she, but who's your husband? I said, well, there isn't one. I'm here in my own right. And actually, that was probably the best way to deal with it, because he was unreformable. He was never going to change. He spent 80 years being like that. Actually, that's his men's club. However, what needed to happen underneath is that the men's club needed to change, and that was what needed to happen underneath. And it was reforming slowly. Some people, you just can't quite reconstruct that fast.
So what would, I guess, what sort of checks would you put in place to, I guess, to understand whether you were perceiving the situation differently to how it might be? And maybe, Julie, you could also weigh in on this bit.
Yeah, happy to. And what a fabulous example, Liz, in that situation. I can imagine, how that felt. And just taking a moment, I think, is the big thing. Am I reacting to this emotionally, or is this person being deliberately obtuse and trying to antagonize me? And the best form of defense, I think, as Liz has described, is that kind of coming back with brilliance. And, I always think when you're giving feedback like that, because people do, I think they do respect, most people do respect being, you sharing with them that actually what they're saying or what they said or the word they used isn't something that you would recommend they continue to do so. So most people do respect being told. And I would do it, give it as a sort of benefit sandwich, as Liz has explained. The amazing point, and then by the way you said this, and then the amazing point, and to get that respect. So I think, what can you do? Take a moment to ask yourself, is this deliberate or personal? Does it really bother me, or am I just getting irritated by something that doesn't actually matter? Because that person, as Liz just described, may just be that way, and some people you can't change. And then in my experience, I've found much more success when I've quietly taken people to one side and not challenged them publicly, and just said, I just wanted to let you know, and I didn't want to make a fuss in front of her, because I think what you said was amazing. But when you said this, this is how it made me feel. And I just wanted you to know that, because I know that would not be your intention, but I felt, if nobody else is going to tell you, then maybe I can. And, it's to the point of what Dianne said earlier. It's about allyship, and teaching people to be better, and helping people to be better, and educating people. Because sometimes we all say things that we don't mean to be offensive, or that, whatever that might be. And if no one tells you, how are you ever going to grow, or how are you ever going to know? So that would be my advice.
I completely agree, Julie. Very few people set out to deliberately offend. Very, very few people. Most are mortified when they realise that they have. And a coaching conversation methodology is a great way to do it. Always has been, always will be. In any situation, give the compliment. This is amazing. Would have been, blah blah blah. So much better if. That's not quite the way it's going to go. But that's the very much. You're absolutely right. That format works so nicely. It really does.
It is nice to be on the receiving end of that as well, isn't it? So being able to check yourself and focus on the right problems, it can be quite hard, and sometimes we do require guidance in that situation. And maybe if we sort of touch a bit more on that mentoring side of things, Dianne, I know that you have been very heavy in the mentoring space. Maybe you could tell us a bit about some of the mentors that you've had throughout your career and how those relationships came about.
Sure. And I guess the reason why I'm so passionate about mentoring is I realise how much it's benefited me. Really from university days, I had some amazing mentors at university where I studied computer and communication law, and they were in the field. And actually, what's been so amazing is how they've tracked my career, and at every opportunity have looked to support me in my career. I'm going to name them, they'll be highly embarrassed now, but Anne Flanagan, Christopher Millard, Ian Walden, they're my sort of triangle of support, and were my lecturers at university, found me opportunities in big corporates, supported me throughout, and to this day actually supporting me in my business. And actually for me, I kind of feel, well, I've been given that support. I'd like to do the same. Someone said to me, you've got to send the lift back down. So in my organization, one of the first things I did was set up an internship program, that actually leads to actual work and careers and a job, not an exploitative thing, and that actually pays well, so the individuals are getting the experience and are also getting that sort of financial support too, and an infrastructure within the business where they have got more senior individuals mentoring them proactively, because I've sort of seen the benefits of that. So and I'm always open, whenever anybody asks, to be mentored by myself. I'm always open to doing it, even if it's for, a limited period of time, because there's nothing more rewarding on both sides, actually, for the mentor and the mentee. So I'm a big sort of champion of any sort of mentoring program, because I've benefited from the same.
So maybe you could help us with maybe a piece of advice that you could give somebody who's looking for a mentor.
So I think it's about finding someone who has something that they can offer you, really, whether it's sort of experience, and actually pretty much most of the time it is, or contacts, connections, that they can introduce you to. And being proactive around it, actually, and cultivating that relationship, actually. And so yes, so it's sort of finding a mentor that's a good fit for you, and cultivating and being proactive around the relationship.
Right. And Julie, I know that you have had a lot to do with mentoring as well over the years. And can you maybe help us with, for younger generations, both male and female, in terms of removing career path biases, where they've probably previously been geared towards a certain gender or race? Is there anything you can offer from that mentoring space? How we can try and remove those career path biases?
Yeah, sure. And Dianne, I think what you said is excellent in terms of how people can find the right mentor. When I've advised, when people come to me and say, no, I want a mentor, the first question I say was, why do you feel you want a mentor? What is it that you feel that you could gain from that? And having clarity on specifically what you're looking for, because then the world opens up to you in terms of the kind of people that may be able to give you the kind of support that you're actually looking for, and then you line up with the right person. So I definitely, for anybody who's thinking about a mentor, is just reflect on why and then what you want from that. In terms of the future, there's three things here for me. There's there's education, inspiration, and accommodation. So it starts with making sure that every single one of us, and there's over 100 people on this call today, each one of us has touch points into the next generation in some way, I'm sure. So whether that's your own children or your friends, your nieces, your nephew, your next door neighbours, whoever they may be, you have a point of influence, and you will come into contact with young people who may be thinking about their future career. And we simply have a responsibility as reasonably successful people in this industry, men and women, to take the time to talk to children that may not be aware, through the access to education that they have, of the great, fantastic careers that they can have in the IT industry. As I said earlier, I came from a family of 9. We didn't have much money. I went to a local school, and I had absolutely no idea that one day I was going to be stood on the stage in Las Vegas in front of 1,000 people introducing Satya Nadella. No, but when I tell that story to young people and they realise the opportunity that is there for them, then it creates that ambition. So education is of critical importance. So everything that all of us can do to make young people aware of the opportunity that's out there is critical. The second point is that inspiration. So telling your stories, telling young people about the great things. When you've got something great and a young person looks up to you, they, I love your car, or, you know, wow, have you been there, or what you've done. Talk to them about how you achieved that and what you've actually done to get where you are, to give that inspiration. And for anybody to think they can at least have a crack at it, and know what is available in the technology industry to them. And then accommodation. So what I mean by that is the companies that have the opportunity to accommodate the onboarding of young people into the industry, whether that is through apprenticeship programs, whether that is running incentive days with their employees to get into the schools and to talk to people and into the colleges and into the universities, you know, accommodating the need for that education and inspiration is kind of where it's all going to change. So we have a huge voice together. There are millions of us in this industry, but we know we're facing a skills shortage. And if we don't get more young people coming into our industry, then what's the future going to look like in terms of employment? You know, gone are the days where only one person in a family has to work. You know, both people have to work. We have to be able to accommodate that. And we are the generation of change. And we're proving that by conversations that we're having today, and all of us, men and women on this call that believe in it, have an opportunity to do something about it. So let's stop talking about it and let's get out there and do something and talk to people about what they can achieve.
Julie, that is so powerful. I love that. And I love the education piece, you know, share it and make sure that we know, you know, everyone knows exactly what, you know, where you can go with a career as well. I'm very conscious that we are nearing the end of the chat. And so what I would like to do is do a little bit of an about turn and sort of finish on a question before we move into the audience Q&A on a syndrome. So we as a group, as a collection of the audience and everyone here, we've probably all heard about imposter syndrome and have probably all at some point experienced it as well. But a syndrome that I've recently learned about and probably have always actually known about is Queen Bee syndrome. And I was wondering, Liz, if maybe you can tell us a little bit about your experience with this. Liz, are you? Well,
there we go. Sorry, having muting issues. My computer tech. Good job I don't work in tech or cyber, isn't it? Oh. Imagine how embarrassing that would be. Yeah. So Queen Bee syndrome. We have male allies. We've spoken about the need for that, and Dianne made a really pertinent point about sending the lift back down. Queen Bees are those women that don't do that. They're the ones who sit there and surround and have achieved a position, probably by pretending to be male and adopting some of those attributes. We all try it. I would suggest there's very few women in tech or in male-dominated environments who have attributes, realise that it doesn't work for them, and then work out how to act. But actually, this Queen Bee syndrome are the people who get themselves to the top, surround themselves by males, and then make it more difficult for women to get up there to achieve where they are. It makes it very difficult. We actually had a discussion about this before we came on and participated today, and you feel hurt almost that another woman is not advocating for you, not because you want preferential treatment, but because they should recognise that you've been through what you're going through, and that's that mentorship they should be sending back down. And it becomes very toxic and it becomes very difficult. And I think when you naturally know that you want to help other people, suddenly finding that above you becomes really very difficult to navigate, because you have to start getting Machiavellian to work out how you're going to get around it. And it might be that you can't, and you end up having to move because it doesn't suit with where you are. So it's a really interesting one. I know Julie's got some experience of this as well, because we had that discussion. But yeah, it's one to watch out for, and we have to watch out that we don't do it ourselves. We have to watch out that we don't do it ourselves by looking at the next generation and very accidentally saying, well, they're nothing like I was. And taking on the you hear your parents do it, your mothers and your grandmothers. Well, in our day, and we have to be very careful that in being advocates for women in tech and women in cyber and women generally in the workplace, that we don't accidentally turn ourselves into a queen bee by making it more difficult for those coming up, because we have higher expectations of them at the start based on where we are now.
Liz, do you think, maybe I can just ask a follow-on before we pass it over, do you think it's because the queen bees are fear that there's not enough seats at the table, or is it because they view it was almost like in the US we'd be like the fraternity, well, I was hazed, so you have to haze the next person, you know, kind of like that, or is it more a threat? What have you seen?
I've seen both. I've seen one where someone's felt utterly threatened because they probably have imposter syndrome as well. So they feel they've got imposter syndrome and they're there, and they feel that if someone comes up who can recognise that, then they'll challenge. And that makes so you have that combination of things going on. Actually, if they brought the female into their confidence, they'd suddenly find they got the support and they'd be stronger together.
Yeah.
Wow. And I know when we were having this conversation about Queen Bee syndrome, Emma, you had also been a recipient of some of the negative side of this before. Would you be able to share that with us?
Yeah, I won't go into details. I don't want to name and shame, but it can, just as Liz said, it can be the hardest to deal with when it's a woman who's perhaps not your, you don't want preferential treatment, but you at least wanted to be treated with respect. And typically what I've found is that perhaps it is the sort of imposter syndrome, or perhaps it's their own unconscious bias. But I often find that women can be our own worst enemies, and perhaps doubt. For example, I've had many women doubting my technical capability, and perhaps men aren't doubting that. So I think we all need to reflect on whether we are ever like that. But I think if you look at it from generations to generations, we can be successful as a woman and behave differently. So I do think there's a generational thing here where we don't need to take on characteristics that are in our environments, or perhaps are male characteristics. We don't need to do that now to be successful. So I think the more that we support each other, regardless of who we are, I think that's a much better place to be in. Completely agree.
I was going to say earlier on as well, when we react to stuff and when we react to bias, and this is a bias as well, that emotional reaction, it's exactly what we ask of our people when we want them to not click the link in a phishing email. We want them to take 5 seconds to think about how they're reacting. And I guarantee that when you've seen a queen bee operate, after the meeting, they're kind of going, oh, good grief, that was the worst meeting ever. I wish I had some support. And actually, it's a situation they've created for themselves. And it is difficult to overcome. But I think there's something there about stepping back and asking why that person is reacting like that, and whether there's a way you can go and have a conversation with them, again, quietly to one side, to see about how you can move forward together and drawing it to the attention. I think it's exactly the same thing that we spoke about with the bias on a male side. I was thinking about this afterwards. We had this conversation about how you address it. It's massively difficult, but it is about stepping it back, taking the emotion out of it, and having that quiet discussion. Not to say you did this, but how do we move forward together better, because I'd like to support you, and actually just changing it around ever so slightly. Sometimes it won't succeed. Sometimes it won't, because the person's so entrenched. But you might find that you can actually do something really powerful just by bringing it to their attention.
Yeah, and I think by taking the emotion out, that's really, really pivotal, because you might find you're playing into their hands and playing into their stereotypes. So if you do feel that sort of anger or that sort of mood rising, then my tip is to take yourself out of the room and pretend you're looking down on the situation, and straight away you've taken all of that emotion out. But how you respond is important. And for me, it's where I lose credibility in that other person, to be honest, because I can see quite clearly that it's perhaps they are feeling under threat, or not feeling in a comfortable situation. So it shouldn't knock your own confidence, but you certainly should take the emotion out when you respond and deal with it.
So taking that helicopter view of the situation and putting yourself in their shoes is sort of that one of those things in the toolkit of how you might deal with that. That's really good. And I guess, Julie, because I know that you have had quite a lot you've got a lot of a lot to say on this front as well. Have you got any other advice that you could offer to anyone who is experiencing working with someone in the queen bee syndrome?
I mean, what Liz and Emma have given is incredibly valuable, and the discussions that we've all had as we've come up to this, everything that Kim said and Dianne said, but I think it's just a point where you've got to sort of again stop, take a minute, and ask yourself actually what's going on here. Take the emotion out of it. And I was at an event, a Women of the Channel event a few years ago, and we discussed this subject. And one of the ladies there said, you know what, a bad leader is a bad leader, and a bad manager is a bad manager. Now, is there, and I think Dianne asked this question, what would you call, is there an equivalent for a man that's one of those, that's protecting his position and won't let other people succeed? And so kind of we're giving it energy, I guess, by us having it, but nevertheless it exists. So, do we say, no, I'm not going to talk about that and ignore the elephant in the room and pretend it's not there? Or do we say, well, actually, this is something that does exist, and how do we address it? And I've got on over the years with queen bees. And you know what? Most of the time, I find that the people who have got that high in an organisation and are female, absolutely, they're not without teeth. But neither is a man who's in a high position. But I think that they feel that they have this consistent need to prove themselves and to push away any threat before it becomes a threat. And so perhaps some of those individuals, the best way to deal with it is actually to make friends, just like you would with somebody who could be a potential bully in the playground, because that's sometimes there's an element of that, this feeling that keeping people down makes them feel stronger or bigger or greater or better or whatever that is. And in my experience of dealing with a queen bee, having the conversation, taken to the one side, as I said earlier, rather than public confrontation, and just asking what's going on, and then proving yourself to that person, man or woman, but particularly the queen bee, is to show that you are worthy and you are credible and that you can stand shoulder to shoulder at the same level. And once that's proven, you will build the greatest advocate that you have ever had, if you can connect in that way. And I think it was Madeleine Albright said, repeated by Sheryl Sandberg, that there's a special place in hell for women that don't support other women. And I think all of us on here do have the same feeling. Women do stand together and look after each other, and so we should, because we are the minority in this industry. And until that changes, we have to back each other up.
Definitely. And the term that I really liked that you used then was shoulder to shoulder. I think that probably sums up a really nice sort of closing almost to the discussion, the panel discussion, shoulder to shoulder. So on that note,
sounds like the cricket.
I know it does. Who's watching the cricket? On that note, that finishes off the actual panel discussion portion of today, but we would like to move into the audience Q&A. And just before we do that, we just want to talk a little bit. We have got one question in the Menti poll at the moment. You might notice in the chat that you'll be able to see something there. And the question that we have for you is, what other topics would you like to hear about in the future? So if you can quickly put an answer in for that for us, and it's going to help us as well to make sure that we're developing future events. But while that's being answered, we could probably start moving into some of the questions. And I know we've had quite a few of them come through. So while we're having everyone answer that, I might move into the first question here, which is for Emma. So the question is, do you think the younger generation looks at the divide between men and women in a similar way? Or women starting the career today have an advantage over the or the women starting the career today have advantage over the generation prior to them? If yes, How significant is this advantage?
Wow, it's a great question. And if I think back to my mum and dad's generation, my mum had, I remember her saying to me that she had two choices, well, three choices actually, for what she did after school. If she wasn't going to university, and she didn't, I was the first generation to go to university, was either to be a secretary, a teacher, or a housewife. And if I then skip forward to my generation, the world is really at my oyster. And clearly when I was at school, cybersecurity wasn't on the table. People weren't thinking about how do you secure the internet and technology. But I certainly, the opportunities have massively increased. So I think it's a big yes for me. And we should see that as an advantage, because for all of the three areas that Julie said in terms of the inspiration and collaboration and being visible. I think we need to just open our eyes and be open-minded to all the possibilities. And if you're naturally good at something, if you enjoy something, then why not go for that? Don't be put off because you may assume that it's not the right career for you. So I think it's a massive advantage that we just need to go from strength to strength. And I do hope that the COVID-19 situation hasn't set women back. I hear that that's what's happening, and I really hope that isn't what happens. We've come a long way.
Yeah, Emma, I read an article this morning that said because of COVID-19, the burden of like caregiving and overseeing children at school and running the household has disproportionately fallen on women. And that over the past year, women have dropped out of the workforce at a rate 4 times higher than men. So I think on the shoulder to shoulder comment, we have so much we need to do to help women get back in, get them to get settled and kind of get back in.
Definitely. Maybe just one extra question in that space in that case, because with COVID, we've obviously been virtual working. How does that play into, I guess, finding our voice online and in meetings? Because that's a huge change for us, for everyone now. Can we find our voice in meetings the same way we would find our voice in person?
Yeah, I think the feeling was that these types of platforms, Zoom platforms, where the remote video platform was a view that it was going to create more equality, like level the field. And I think a couple surveys were done, one by Society of Women Engineers. I think they said like 30% of them said they felt that it was harder, or they'd been in the process, been in an environment with more negative interaction where they're talked over or can't get their voice heard or continually interrupted. So I think it's probably a little harder. It's definitely not easier or better. And I get the sense that, for some, depending on your style and how you like to operate, being remote, for those folks that want to be heads down, focused on work, it's easier to kind of not be seen and not be heard. So I think for women, for anyone really, but for women, you need to just have your voice heard more and be on video and engage in those conversations and make a point of doing it. I also think being remote, there's just much more kind of asynchronous communication, emails going out all the time. Be clear and concise and on point with your message, and be thoughtful of the fact that whoever you're sending it to probably has 100 of them. But really try it and be present, I think, is an important part, and stay connected. That would be my view on it. And if others have thoughts.
Yeah, I think there's actually been some real benefits from it. I have friends who have children, who very much young children working around them, who would never be able to make the in-person meeting in town because their life is not set up for it, and because they are working flexibly, maybe working 30-hour weeks rather than the standard time week. Actually, through working remotely, there's been two things. One, they've seen the men have to deal with, or everyone have to deal with other issues. The person at the door being the person that has to go and answer because the delivery guy's just arrived, the dog's barking, the children running in. Actually, you start to get humanity. Everybody's equal on that. Everybody has an issue to deal with. But they're also getting an opportunity to take part in meetings that ordinarily they might not be able to make, because they've had the in-person one and they wouldn't dial in because they would feel a little bit odd about dialing in, and they would just send their points with somebody else. Actually, virtually, they're getting the opportunity to have their voices heard. So I think there is a benefit from that, and that does enable them to juggle effectively and have that flexible lifestyle. I agree. There are still challenges with it, and there are definitely challenges with everything happening in the virtual world, but I think there is that element of being able to show people you can have a voice, you can have an effect, and look, what you said in that meeting has actually created that action, which is taking something forward as an improvement. That's pretty amazing, actually.
I agree.
I think it's so important to encourage women to speak up, and to facilitate that culture within an organisation. And it's like very much what we said at the beginning: the more you do it, the better practiced you are, the easier it's going to get. And so to encourage junior women within the team also to just have that experience of having a voice and being present in meetings and not being afraid to share that, and recognizing that it is, what they have to say is valuable.
Yeah, and I think coaching our managers and our leaders to make sure they're looking out for those voices that they don't hear, because you can no longer read the room the same way, to make sure that everyone has that opportunity. That's important.
That's so important. The hierarchy has to be able and set up to listen.
Yeah.
And that's really, really key. Sometimes it's not. And that's something that has to change. And that's not something that's just for females. That's something for everybody. When it's hierarchically based, it has to be able to listen to somebody who's junior, who's in the room. They might not phrase it in the way that they're expecting, but it might be the most important point they hear in that meeting.
Mm-hmm. So how do we coach them?
You can take the people to one side after the meeting and say, great point. Next time, if you want, what did you notice about the way they reacted? Brilliant. Okay, so what would you do better next time? People know what they're not doing. They realise that it hasn't gone quite well, but it's bringing it back out and having that coaching conversation with them. So you did that. How did that feel? Well, was a little bit nervous. Why? Well, you go into the what was it that made you feel nervous, and then, did that land as you'd expected to? And if the answer is yes, you go, okay, so what reaction did you get? And you get to coach that around. And if the answer is no, you then get something to work with. But it's about being really open about contacting people and helping them and praising someone. That was amazing. So pleased you spoke up. What an amazing thing to do. How did it feel?
Yeah.
And you can do it authentically without it sounding like you're completely bigging somebody up, in some sort of artificial manner. There's a real authentic way that you can do it, because 9 times out of 10, if you're sitting there and somebody really junior has spoken up, you're thinking, blooming good for you, well done.
Definitely. We have got quite a number of questions that have come through, so I'll try and get through a couple of these with the group. This one here is for Dianne. How important do you think the use of language is, even when we're young? For example, bossy.
Yeah, I mean, it is this sort of conditioning that you get, right? And then you have to work at countering that as an adult, and we do have to be really careful in terms of how we address our children and young ones around us. And I'm as guilty as anyone, in terms of I have to be very careful about the language I use. I have both boys and girls, mum of 6 myself. And very, very aware and also open to be challenged on it, which my kids do challenge me. Actually, they'll say, Mom, that was a bit sexist of you. Why did you ask your daughter not to act in such an unladylike manner? What does that mean? And quite frankly, I'm proud. I just think, oh, great. They're correcting me now. And so I do think language is important, and we can all do better. But also, I think it's important to recognize that when people sometimes fall short, as we've said before, not to make them feel sort of so uncomfortable. Actually have a quiet word rather than embarrassing people publicly, because I just don't think that achieves anything. And then when you make a mistake yourself, forgive yourself for it. You know, we're human at the end of the day. You know, we will fail, we will fall short. And I think it's important that we, you know, support each other in this journey that we're going on to be better and to do better, and to forgive ourselves when we make mistakes. Brilliant.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to move into the closing side of things. So I'm going to move this question for Julie, which has come out, because I think this could be a good one for you to talk through. Increasing one's profile is often something that people hear as a barrier to being promoted. There is a view that women are less comfortable with championing themselves and knowing how to navigate increasing their profile. Are there any tips the panel could give in how to address this? So actually, it's probably a good one for everyone.
Anyone else want to answer that? Liz, you look like a mistake. Tumbleweed. Okay, that's a really great question, actually, in terms of increasing your profile and being able to do that, I guess, in a professional way for the right reasons, I guess is what we're getting at here. So I think that using champions and allies to promote you is a great way to raise your profile. So we all have colleagues and friends and people that are close to us that we may feel more comfortable asking for raising our profile than maybe if we're trying to get that to a senior people. So I would look around you at maybe some of the people that you work closely with and see how they can help you to do that, because sometimes you can't get in the room. So you've got to look at who can get in the room and see how they can help you. And I also think that we tend definitely as women to hide our light a bit under a bushel, and there's nothing wrong with being proud of what you've achieved. I mean, no one wants to brag overly about their achievements or to sound like they've got out a trumpet and stood on a street corner talking about how wonderful they are. But there's no reason at all where you can't create environments where everybody has the opportunity to share great things. So my organisation, we kick off every Monday on a Monday morning with Win of the Week. And what everybody does is say something amazing that happened to them last week. And you know what? Most of those conversations are where other members of the team are congratulating somebody else and saying those great things. And that just raises your profile. So it's a very team kind of attitude. And people also share their challenges in the second half of the meeting. And then when they come back the following week and they say, I talked about this challenge last week, here's what I did, and I overcame it, and everybody applauds that, and that helps to raise the profile. So I think there are some things you can do as a team to support each other, some different and innovative ways where you give people the platform to share their successes, and also to ask for help and support, maybe to people who can get to places that you can't, and not be frightened to do that, because at the end of the day, everybody loves to support people to be successful.
Completely agree. I think another really great way of doing it is volunteering. Volunteer to do something. If someone comes up in a meeting, don't just sit back there and go, oh crikey, I don't want to be part of that. Absolutely volunteer, stick your head above the parapet a little bit. It's not going to get chopped off. Everybody will be happy for you to be there. And actually, if you can't do it in the meeting, in your dead set work environment, what's going on around the outside? What are you passionate about that you can suddenly start to advocate for? If it's women in the workplace, there will be a balance. We have a balance network where I am. That's amazing. Go and volunteer as part of it and start to become known for that, because that way you can brief about it in meetings and push the information out. You suddenly start to be seen as someone who's got more strings to their bow, more capable than they might otherwise have been seen to be, and not afraid to take something on. And that's all great. That's all great stuff that you can do for yourself, because then people will start to advocate for you, because someone will say, oh, that person over there, yeah, that was amazing. Did you see it? No, I didn't. But hey, how about asking her if she would like to? That's the way we get onto here. It's the way we got to be part of this, which is phenomenal. Is someone saw us, spoke to us, and we volunteered to be part of something previously. And it's really powerful to have the guts to volunteer to do something. Take yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit.
That's very helpful, and those are really practical things that we can actually take forward and to use. So final question. I'll put this one to Emma first, and if anyone wants to build upon it, you are absolutely welcome. What do you think we will be talking about in 5 years' time when we discuss the subject of women in technology?
Well, I'd like to hope that we're not discussing it because it's just part of technology. So I'd love it to not even be a panel, as much as I've enjoyed this. and perhaps it's about other diversity, or hopefully we've already in 5 years got through where we've got balance for everywhere. But yeah, I think I don't want to be on a panel session in 5 years' time talking about this. Perhaps talking about technology would be good.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just going to add into that. I think it's really key to remember that we're in a really fortuitous position in our countries, in the West, in the UK, in what we perceive to be the Western world. That is not the same everywhere else. And so I think that whilst we're talking about technology in the UK and America and everything else, and the STEM and all the rest, we need to be really clear that the lessons we learn are going to be learned elsewhere around the world. And maybe if we work in multinational organizations, that culture is something that is still up and coming in some of those areas. So that influence, we will still be having these discussions in 5 years' time, maybe not in our own environment, and maybe looking to see how we can better influence elsewhere. Maybe that's where the attention will have turned, because to your point, Emma, over here and in America, maybe we're just talking about technology and showing how amazing our knowledge is.
I would like to add, I'd like to hear less about the Elon Musks and the Tim Cooks and the Zuckerbergs of this world, and more about the sort of Alicias and the Zoes and the Tamaras leading the technology companies of the future. So I hope that we're speaking about that, for many years to come.
Absolutely.
Here.
Shoulder to shoulder. I think that's probably one of my key takeouts from today, and I think on that rounds out our Protiviti Women in Tech panel discussion today. So we hope everyone has taken something very meaningful out of this event, and you yourself can choose to challenge. Before you do leave today, we would really appreciate it if you could take a minute just to answer the final questions that we have, which we will be putting in the chat, which will be very helpful for us to gauge some feedback from the session. But I would really like to now just thank our wonderful panelists who have taken the time from their very, very busy schedules to share their personal experiences and insights so publicly. So Liz Murray, Julie Simpson, Dianne Hewitt-Mills, Emma Leith, and Kim Bozella. Thank you very, very much. I also wanted to call out a very big thank you to the extremely hardworking Protiviti team who have made this event happen. As you probably can imagine, these events take a lot of planning, coordination and effort. And I'd like to extend a very special mention in particular to Brooke Osborne and Alyssa Adams, who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to get this event coordinated. Also Elena Lando, who heads up our UK IGRO and our IGRO committee, which stands for the Growth and Retention of Women in the Workplace. And this committee is the driving force behind this panel event and our International Women's Day week of events that we have lined up as well. Also, Abby Talukder and Lauren Gomzel, you've been working behind the scenes on the Menti poll and the live drawing, which we'll be following up after this event. Our marketing team, Gary Reynolds, Sean Fothergill, Supriya Singh and Kathy Trawler. I also wanted to thank our MD sponsors, Tom Lemon and Phil Greaves, for ensuring that these events have the senior sponsorship required to get off the ground. And lastly, to our wonderful audience, thank you very much for taking the time to join us for this event. Really appreciate it and hope you've managed to take something out of the event today. So stay happy, healthy, and of course, always choose to challenge. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.